Picture this. It is 2 o'clock in the morning in Tudor London. The streets, usually bustling with vendors, livestock, apprentices, and gossip, lie silent beneath a veil of fog. Oil lamps sputter weakly against the damp night air. Somewhere in the labyrinth of alleyways, a figure moves with quiet purpose, carrying buckets, ropes, and shovels that clink softly with every step. This is no criminal, no late-night reveler. This is someone whose work keeps the city alive. While the wealthier residents rest in feather beds and the poor huddle in cramped tenements, this unseen laborer and her family descend into the literal underworld of the city. The cesspits, the privies, the hidden cavities where human waste accumulated beneath Tudor homes. This is the world of the Gong Farmers Wives, women who belonged to one of the most essential and yet one of the most reviled professions in urban history. Their contributions were invisible, their work done in darkness, and their names almost entirely lost. But without them, the growing cities of medieval and early modern Europe would have drowned under their own filth. Before exploring the lives of the women in this trade, we must understand the job itself. The term gong derives from the Old English gang, meaning to go, an early euphemism for relieving oneself. Over time, gong came to refer directly to the waste itself, and a gong farmer was the person responsible for removing it. Also known as night soil men, rakers, or necessary men, Gong farmers performed the vital function of emptying cesspits and cleaning privies in an era before underground sewer systems existed. Most households, rich and poor alike, relied on pits dug under or behind their homes. These pits could be lined with stone or brick, but many were simply holes in the ground. When they filled up, someone had to climb down and clear them. Enter the Gong farmers, whose labor quite literally prevented epidemics, social collapse, and environmental catastrophe in densely populated urban centers. As medieval Europe experienced rapid urban growth, sanitation problems escalated to crisis levels. In London alone, the population skyrocketed from about 50,000 in 1500 to over 200,000 a century later. Houses were pressed tightly together, overlapping property lines, sometimes sharing walls, and often sharing cesspits. Waste disposal methods that had once been adequate for small medieval towns, such as tossing waste into the street or nearby streams, became utterly impractical and dangerously unsanitary. Wealthier residents often had private privies attached to their houses, sometimes even multiple ones. These might be surprisingly elaborate, lavatory rooms with carved seats, tiled floors, and drainage channels. The pits beneath them could reach depths of 20 to 30 feet. A full pit meant a foul smell, overflowing waste, and risk of illness, so households paid handsomely for professional removal. For poorer Londoners living in tenements or slums, shared communal privies were common, sometimes serving dozens of people. These pits filled faster and were more hazardous. The pressing need for sanitation workers was undeniable, and thus the Gong farmers became indispensable.
While historical records often depict Gong farmers as exclusively male, this picture is incomplete. Women, wives, widows, daughters, and sometimes independent laborers worked alongside men in a range of essential roles. Their involvement disrupts the common assumption that past societies adhered strictly to gendered labor divisions. In reality, survival often demanded flexibility. Women assisted their husbands in the nightly extraction of waste, managed household equipment, negotiated contracts, or in some cases, took over operations entirely after a husband's death. Many Victorian-era historians later tried to fit earlier eras into their own rigid moral frameworks, erasing women from trades they deemed unsuitable. But evidence from parish records, court cases, and municipal regulations shows that women played crucial roles in sanitation work, roles that went largely unacknowledged due to the stigma attached to the job. Gong farming was not an informal or rogue profession. It was a tightly regulated, officially sanctioned trade, overseen by municipal authorities. In London, the Court of Sewers established rules dictating Gong farmers must work strictly at night, usually 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Waste must be carried in closed containers and transported in lidded carts. It was illegal to dump waste within city limits. Workers required licenses and paid fees to operate. Women often worked during these nocturnal hours alongside their husbands. They might stay above ground to hoist buckets from the pit, wrangle equipment, or manage the cart outside. The night schedule provided anonymity, useful in avoiding social scorn, but also imposed grueling demands on family life. Despite its degrading reputation, gong farming could be unexpectedly profitable. Skilled gong farmers were paid well, sometimes 2 to 3 times more than a carpenter, mason, or other trained craftsman. Wealthy households paid premium rates for discretion and efficiency. But this income came with major expenses: licensing fees, cart maintenance, equipment costs, and not uncommonly, bribes to officials. Women in the trade faced additional economic hurdles: lower pay for the same labor, legal barriers to inheriting business rights, and discrimination when negotiating contracts or payments. Widows, in particular, struggled. Though they might have decades of experience, they often found their competence dismissed simply because they were women, and because their work, however essential, was socially reviled. Gong farmers' families occupied the physical and social fringes of the cities they served. They typically lived in the poorest parishes, near city walls, close to other unclean trades, tanners, butchers, knackers, in areas with high population turnover. These marginal neighborhoods formed tightly knit communities where shared hardship fostered solidarity. Women were central to maintaining these support networks, exchanging childcare, sharing food, and passing down vital trade knowledge. Their community bonds served as a buffer against a world that deemed them unclean, unworthy, and untouchable. The story of the Gong Farmers' Wives begins in darkness, both literal and historical. They are nearly invisible in surviving records, yet their labor shaped the health, growth, and survival of entire cities. Understanding their world is the first step in restoring them to the place they deserve in history, not as footnotes of filth, but as essential workers whose resilience allowed urban civilization to flourish.
While the Gong farmer himself occupies a narrowly defined position in early modern urban economies, the daily life of his wife is even more accessible to the historical record. Their labor did not generate official tenancy agreements, occupational lists, or guild disputes. Their names rarely appeared in parish accounts unless under the headings of charity, widowhood, or baptism. Yet the structural demands of the gong farming trade, combined with the socio-economic profile of the families who performed it, make it possible to reconstruct with reasonable confidence the rhythms, responsibilities, and burdens of the women who sustained these households. They were not merely passive partners, but active contributors to the survival and continuity of one of the most stigmatized professions in 16th century cities. The wives of gong farmers carried out most of the labor typical of poor urban households: food preparation, cleaning, laundry, animal care, and the supervision of children. But the conditions under which they performed these tasks were shaped profoundly by the nature of their husbands' work. The household's proximity to human waste, whether through storage pits, night soil tubs, or contaminated transport tools, meant that sanitation was a daily practical concern long before the emergence of scientific germ theory. Women were responsible for keeping sleeping areas separated from work equipment, ensuring that the family's limited cooking utensils were not contaminated, and managing the constant turnover of work garments that required soaking, boiling, or ash-based washing. The need to maintain cleanliness in an occupation defined by filth demanded continuous physical labor. Laundry, in particular, was arduous. Many gong farmers' wives hauled water from communal pumps or nearby streams, often several times a day. Boiling clothes in iron pots over open hearths filled already cramped rooms with steam, heat, and smoke. This domestic routine itself made the home both a site of labor and a workplace hazard. Smoldering fires, unventilated cooking spaces, and the constant presence of dampness all contributed to respiratory and joint ailments commonly referenced in accounts of the very poor. Many wives of gong farmers supplemented the household's income by engaging in low-status or unregulated work. Surviving records of poor parish relief and inventories of pauper households provide indirect clues. Spinning wool, brewing small ale for neighbors, selling vegetables or fish scraps, and mending garments were among the most probable means of securing additional coin. Because gong farming was seasonal in some towns, demand peaked in warm seasons or before major civic events, women's earnings often sustained families during periods when less waste was processed. In larger cities, especially London,
Some wives almost certainly participated directly in aspects of their husband's occupation. Although civic ordinances forbade women from transporting night soil or entering certain municipal sanitation sites, these rules were unevenly enforced, particularly in poorer parishes. A wife might help by washing tools, repairing sacks or buckets, or sorting materials removed from cesspits, organic refuse, broken pottery, scrap metal, or even lost personal items that could occasionally be resold. The boundary between household labor and occupational assistance was fluid, with wives stepping into physically demanding tasks whenever necessity required.
The physical toll borne by Gong Farmers' wives remains largely unrecorded, but informed inference suggests that these women experienced chronic health challenges. While husbands faced acute dangers, fumes from cesspits, collapses, and drowning, wives endured slow, grinding exposure to environmental contaminants brought back into the home on clothing, tools, and skin. Prolonged contact with soiled equipment likely contributed to persistent skin infections, respiratory irritation, and digestive illnesses. Childbearing occurred within these harsh conditions. Midwives working in poorer districts recorded higher incidences of stillbirth, infant mortality, and postnatal infections, though not explicitly tied to Gong farming families. The combination of malnutrition, physical labor, and close proximity to waste made pregnancy precarious. Yet these women continued to manage the household economy, often resuming labor within days of childbirth, a necessity dictated by the unrelenting cycle of poverty. The wife of a Gong farmer lived under the same cloud of social stigma that surrounded her husband's trade. While some low-status occupations carried a degree of grudging respect, such as millers, tanners, or butchers, the handling of human waste was considered uniquely degrading. This contempt extended to family members, meaning wives often faced exclusion from parish committees, charitable guilds, or female mutual aid networks dominated by artisan spouses. Nevertheless, these women developed alternative social webs. Informal associations among neighbors in the same line of unclean trades, tanners' wives, knackers' wives, and bone collectors, provided channels for the exchange of goods, favors, and childcare. Mutual dependence, rather than moral reputation, shaped these networks. While elite society dismissed these communities, within them, reciprocity and shared hardship generated strong bonds. Oral histories and later folkloric accounts suggest that despite stigma, such neighborhoods were not devoid of dignity. Many women cultivated reputations for reliability, resourcefulness, or healing knowledge grounded in vernacular practices. Within early modern societies, women's work was often framed through a moral lens. Industriousness was virtuous, idleness sinful. The wives of Gong farmers negotiated this moral economy under particularly challenging circumstances. Their labor was essential but culturally invisible. Their industriousness taken for granted rather than praised. At the same time, moral suspicion often fell on poor women living near the urban margins. Gossip, reputational slander, and moralizing parish officials frequently linked poverty with moral laxity. Ironically, the stability of urban sanitation systems depended on the very households that officials regarded with moral disdain. Women's participation in maintaining tools, managing soiled clothing, and organizing households that could support a physically exhausted husband
constituted an unacknowledged backbone of the public health infrastructure. Their work ensured that cesspits were emptied on schedule, that diseases associated with stagnant waste were mitigated, and that cities remained habitable. Raising children in a Gong farming household imposed additional pressures. Young children were kept close to home due to the dangers of open pits, polluted watercourses, and hazardous work tools. Older children, especially daughters, assisted their mothers in domestic tasks, gaining early exposure to harsh physical routines. Sons, depending on family circumstances, might assist their fathers or seek other unskilled labor. Some Gong farming families displayed patterns of intergenerational continuity, with sons inheriting the tools and municipal contracts of their fathers. In these cases, wives played a central role in transmitting the practical knowledge necessary to maintain the household economy: how to stretch limited food stores, how to repair linen, how to maintain sturdy garments suitable for night labor, and how to negotiate with parish officers. The continuity of this knowledge was a form of cultural labor essential to the survival of families in precarious occupations. The wives of Gong farmers inhabited a world defined by invisibility, both in historical archives and in contemporary social perception. Yet their labor, domestic, economic, social, and intergenerational, was indispensable to the operation of early modern sanitation systems and to the survival of their own families. They navigated the double burden of poverty and stigma, sustaining households that elite society preferred not to acknowledge. Through a careful reconstruction of available evidence, their lives emerge not as footnotes to their husbands' labor, but as central actors within the hidden infrastructure of early modern cities.
The social position of Gong farmers' families, and especially their wives, was shaped not only by the nature of the occupation, but by a wider cultural system that equated physical filth with moral inferiority. In the rigid, hierarchical society of the 16th century, cleanliness was not merely a matter of sanitation, it was a symbol of divine virtue, social refinement, and moral purity. Consequently, families who worked in occupations dealing with excrement, animal waste, or corpse handling were placed at the lowest edges of the social order. Gong farmers' wives lived at the crossroads of these attitudes. They were essential to urban life, but existed within a social climate that constantly reminded them of their supposed inferiority. Daily interactions reinforced this hierarchy. Vendors in the marketplace might hesitate before handing over goods, subtly pulling their sleeves away as if fearful of contamination. More privileged women, those of merchants or middling status artisans, often directed their children to avoid those households, reinforcing prejudice across generations. Even in church, one of the few communal spaces meant for spiritual equality, Gong farmers' wives rarely escaped scrutiny. They sat on benches close to the back, where drafts crept through the stone walls, and where parish officials could keep a discreet eye on the poorer attendees. Their clothing, usually practical wool garments bearing the faint lingering scent of the working world, made them instantly identifiable. Despite these challenges, the women developed adaptive strategies to maintain their dignity. Some used pungent herbal mixtures, rosemary, juniper, lavender, to mask odors that lingered even after rigorous washing. Others cultivated reputations for being exceptionally punctual with parish obligations,
tithes paid in full when possible, attendance at holy days, and visible participation in communal charity. Respectability was a fragile currency, and even the smallest gesture could provide a buffer against social suspicion. The household was the center of these negotiations. While the husband ventured into cesspits and night soil vaults, the wife bore the responsibility of managing the domestic space with precision. Every rag had a purpose, every pot had its place, and storage had to be meticulous to prevent disease from taking hold. The constant fear of illness, brought on by close proximity to waste, malnutrition, and the cramped living quarters of the urban poor, meant daily life was shaped by caution. Women washed tools, clothing, and bedding repeatedly, boiling fabrics over the fire until the room filled with thick steam that clung to the low, smoke-darkened beams. Yet their labors remained invisible to the outside world. Sanitation was seen as a masculine occupation, but its maintenance depended heavily on the wife's supervision. She preserved tools, recorded debts, managed household logistics, and prepared remedies to keep her husband healthy enough to work. These responsibilities, though critical, rarely earned recognition. Instead, they blended into the background of domestic labor expected of all women, regardless of its heightened significance within a Gong farming household. Children's education, too, fell under the wife's sphere. She taught them not only prayer and reading, if she possessed even rudimentary literacy, but also vigilance around hazards. A moment of carelessness could be fatal in an environment where waste pits and contaminated water ran close to the home. Such vigilance was a daily struggle, quietly shaping the emotional landscape of these families. Despite their social marginalization, Gong Farmers' Wives developed strong inner reserves of resilience. Their struggles were not merely physical, but psychological, navigating shame imposed from outside, preserving family honor, and forging identities grounded in hard work rather than public opinion. Their lives illustrate the harsh paradox of early modern urban life. Those who kept cities clean were treated as if they embodied the dirt they removed.
The world of Gong farmers was a universe built on danger, hidden, foul, and constant. And for their wives, those dangers did not simply linger on the periphery of life. They seeped into their homes, their lungs, and their very bones. The nature of waste removal in the 16th century was not merely filthy, it was perilous. And though men did the digging and hauling, wives bore their own share of the hazards, both as silent supporters and as secondary workers who were exposed daily to the deadly realities of the profession. The first and most obvious danger lay in the pits themselves. Medieval and Tudor cesspits were not shallow trenches, but deep, enclosed spaces filled with human waste, decomposing matter, and volatile gases. Gong farmers frequently collapsed from miasma, a term used at the time to describe poisonous fumes believed to cause illness. These fumes, now understood to include methane, ammonia, and hydrogen sulfide, could render a man unconscious in seconds. And while wives rarely descended into the pits themselves, they were never far from the danger. They cleaned tools soaked in those same fumes, laundered clothing saturated with the stench, and tended to husbands who staggered home, dizzy, nauseated, or coughing violently. Every breath they took from a freshly emptied work sack carried microscopic risks: bacteria, parasites, and lung-irritating vapors that lingered long after the workday ended. For women with limited access to fresh water or medicinal remedies, these hazards accumulated into chronic ailments,
persistent coughing, skin irritations, eye infections, and weakened immune systems. Their homes became miniature battlegrounds where the residue of their husband's dangerous work settled into fabrics, walls, and bedding. Then there was the physical labor itself. When the pits overflowed or emergencies struck, floods, disease outbreaks, or heavy workloads, wives often assisted directly. They hauled waste buckets, steadied ladders, or helped pack and transport the night's collection to dumping grounds outside the city walls. These tasks placed enormous strain on their bodies. A 28-year-old Gong farmer's wife, especially one of full, heavy build, faced increased risk of joint pain, back injuries, and strain from repeated lifting and walking long distances with heavy loads. But the dangers were not only physical, they were also environmental. Most cesspits were located beneath homes, taverns, and privies with limited ventilation, so the work often occurred at night to avoid public scrutiny and reduce the spread of foul odors. This meant wives were awake at odd hours, keeping their homes lit, preparing warm meals, or waiting anxiously for their husband's return. Nighttime work brought additional hazards: poor visibility, tripping accidents, falls into open pits, and encounters with criminals who roamed the darkened streets. In broader society, laborers of this trade faced one more invisible hazard: contamination. The concept of germ theory would not emerge until centuries later, yet people instinctively feared the filth. A Gong farmer's wife lived knowing that others saw her as unclean, believing contact with her could cause illness. This stigma often affected her ability to sell goods at markets or access communal facilities such as wells or public washhouses. The emotional toll of such exclusion compounded the daily physical strain. Moreover, medical care was primitive and often inaccessible. If a wife suffered a cut, infection could set in quickly due to constant exposure to bacteria-laden materials. Herbal remedies were often her only defense. Many women kept small bundles of rosemary, thyme, or lavender stuffed into pockets or pinned to their bodices to counter the stench and protect their lungs. But these were charms of hope, not true shields. Despite these hardships, the wives adapted with remarkable resilience. They developed systems of hygiene far ahead of the general population: boiling water for laundry, scrubbing tools with lye, burning rushes to mask odors, and rotating bedding to reduce contamination. Their knowledge of sanitation, though born of necessity, offered a level of protection unmatched by many other working-class households. In the end, their working conditions reveal a world where danger was constant, illness was frequent, and survival depended on endurance, vigilance, and an unbreakable will. These women's lives were harsh, but their strength was formidable, quiet, unseen, yet essential to the functioning of the 16th century city.
When examining the legacy of Gong Farmers' Wives, it becomes clear that their contributions, though rarely celebrated, formed an essential foundation of early urban hygiene and public health. While history has a habit of glorifying monarchs, generals, and scholars, the lives of these women reveal a subtler, often invisible kind of influence. The influence of those who, through sheer endurance, held society together from beneath its clean and polished surface. Their work did not build monuments or shape political treaties, but it sustained the very fabric of city life, ensuring that disease did not run unchecked and that settlements could thrive despite primitive sanitation systems. The silent strength of these women is woven into the evolution of European cities.
As the population of the 16th century grew, towns became increasingly crowded, and refuse management was a constant challenge. Gong farmers and their families, particularly their wives, were crucial to preventing outbreaks of plague, dysentery, cholera, and other deadly illnesses that flourished in unsanitary conditions. While they did not wield medical knowledge, their labor served as a barrier between communities and the chaos of unchecked waste. In this sense, they carried a form of civic responsibility that was never recognized in their lifetime, but is unmistakable when viewed from a historical distance. Gong Farmers' Wives also represent the countless women throughout history who performed essential, exhausting work without acknowledgement. Their daily routines, washing contaminated clothing, tending to the injuries of their husbands, maintaining households in poverty-stricken districts, and managing the emotional weight of working in a despised profession, embodied a type of resilience that laid the groundwork for modern understandings of labor, gender roles, and public sanitation. Their legacy extends beyond the literal tasks they performed. It lies in the structure of community survival itself. In the broader lens of gender history, these women challenge the simplified narrative of early modern womanhood. They were neither delicate nor sheltered, nor confined solely to domestic spaces. Instead, they occupied a harsh reality at the bottom of the social hierarchy, where life demanded both physical strength and emotional fortitude. Their existence complicates the idea that women of this era were passive or inactive in public life. By necessity, Gong Farmers' Wives were deeply involved in work that intersected with civic infrastructure, family survival, and urban stability. From a social perspective, their story offers a reminder of how deeply class shaped one's experience of the world. The stigma attached to their profession lasted generations, and many families who descended from Gong farmers changed surnames or relocated to escape association. Yet, despite this stigma, their labor contributed directly to innovations in sanitation. The pressures of their dangerous working conditions ultimately helped push city leaders to develop more advanced waste removal systems, including improved cesspits, street drainage, and eventually the earliest forms of controlled sewer networks. These developments paved the way for the sanitation revolutions of the 18th and 19th centuries. Although their names seldom appear in historical documents, the traces of Gong Farmers' Wives remain embedded in the progress of urban development. Their endurance reminds modern society that history is not built only by the privileged or powerful, but also by those who toil in obscurity, those who accept the burdens that others refuse to touch. Their role in maintaining early sanitation systems stands as a testament to their importance, even if their stories were nearly lost to time. In many ways, the legacy of these women is a legacy of resilience. It is the legacy of rising each day to face work that was thankless, hazardous, and socially scorned. It is the legacy of women who understood that communities could not function without their labor, even if the world around them pretended otherwise. Today, as historians revisit the lives of common laborers, Gong Farmers' Wives are finally beginning to receive the recognition they were denied for centuries. Their significance lies not in grand achievements, but in the simple, vital truth that society's survival has always depended on the people willing to confront its darkest, dirtiest realities.